What's up, guys? Chris here. I am back. It's time again for the Season 3 Power Rankings. If you don't know what the Power Rankings are, it is basically just me, a guy with absolutely no qualifications and no expertise, making a list of who I think the top GBA teams are in order of the week. And like I said, there's absolutely no qualifications, no requirements, no scientific backing. It's kind of just me giving my opinions. You are more than welcome to disagree with me, and you are more than welcome to tell me why I'm wrong or why I'm right in the comments section. That being said, the only other disclaimer I'll give is I don't hate anybody. So if somebody's getting a bad rap, it's because I think they did something bad, not because they're a bad person. Everybody's pretty cool. So that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, we're mixing things up a little bit this season. We are actually going to start from the bottom. We're going to start at number 16 and work our way up. That way we are staying positive, moving positive. And this week is going to be mostly positive. Nobody really blew anything out of the water. But, you know, somebody has to be at the bottom. That's how this kind of thing works. Number 16 is going to be A-Drive and the St. Louis Rampardos. They had a pretty big loss this week, tied actually with biggest loss for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he lost to a great competitor. Miguel is really good at the game. He's had a season of the GBA D-League underneath his belt where he actually did go undefeated in play. He lost one match because of failure to play, but every match he actually showed up for and played, he won. He won fairly decisively usually, so there's no shame in losing to that guy. And, Dan is the only person coming into the league this season with absolutely no GBA experience, no experience with the format. And, the fact that I think he got a pretty good draft. I think Sun teams are not a thing I usually support. They're usually, Sun's the third best weather. And it's always been that way, and it's kind of always going to be that way. I'm hoping he can mix things up and doesn't have to rely on that too much. And we have seen, some cool stuff from him this week. He did mix it up, and he brought a mixed Dragon Dance Charizard Y, which, threw Miguel off. Wasn't quite enough to get him the win. But, I think some of that's just inexperience with higher tier pokes, a little bit of ring rust, having not played, and again, the fact that he is totally new to the format. The great thing about being last place is he only has up to go from here. And I think he absolutely will. I expect him to, put on some good wins this season. 15 is the Denver Bronzongs, Baby Raj. Baby Raj, who I love, he is a great kid. He's a really good battler. He does have a season of the D-League underneath his belt, but he did lose this match, and he lost it to another expansion team. That's kind of rough. They are at a disadvantage throughout most of the season, statistically, against the other teams that have a lot of really good, really threatening things on them, and they have, less of an arsenal to use and pair up against the opposing teams. That being said, losing to an expansion team hurts a little bit more than losing to another team, so the two losing expansion teams are kind of at the bottom. Along with that, like I said, I think Roger is a great battler. I think he's getting a better grasp on the format after his D-League season, but I don't know if he's quite there yet. At the end of the day, it just seems occasionally he's making the wrong play, and really that's all it comes down to. You can have two people that are, as evenly matched knowledge-wise as possible, as fairly balanced team-wise, but it just comes down to who makes the better plays. And unfortunately, historically, Roger has not been the guy making the better plays. I think he's got it in him. I hope to see it this season, but as of right now, he's got to work his way up. He's got to prove it. He went out of the D-League towards the bottom of the power rankings, and he's going to start season 3 of the GBA at a pretty low end of the power rankings himself. Number 14 is the one, the only Nexus of the Cleveland Cavaliers, a veteran of the bottom of the power rankings from last season. Nexus did pick up some interesting things in the draft this season. I like some of them. A lot of them got very harsh criticism from the other guys, but I think there's some pretty cool things in there he could do a lot with. May not have been the best team synergy-wise, but, there's some good stuff in there. I think Nexus is going to take this season a little bit more seriously, get a little bit more competitive, and, he's going to do great. That being said, though, he did lose his first week's game here. He does still have the remnants of some bad draft choices from previous season, as well as, some questionable things like this season, like Aromatisse, which, is one out of the three I would say I had a problem with. That being said, I think Nexus brought a good team this week. I think he just kind of got outplayed and outpredicted. He played it a little bit straightforward, but, no glaring mistakes like last season. No running Moonblast when he should be running Hyper Voice or anything like that. I think he's definitely got a better attitude heading into the battles this season, and I expect him to do pretty good, a little bit lower on the list than some of the other losses, despite it being a fairly close loss, because he did lose to the LA Nido Kings, who are not going to be the highest team on the list. Spoilers. But, you got to weigh these things accordingly. That being said, Nexus, not the bottom. Still plenty of room to go up or plenty of room to go down. But I expect it to be a fairly competitive season for him, and definitely have a better win percentage than like 2-14 of last season. Number 13 is going to seem a little bit harsh. It's a pretty steep drop from where he was last season, where he was fairly middle of the pack to upper end of the pack all season. But it's going to be the Milwaukee Sawsbucks magnitude. Questionable draft, picking up a lot more, dark weaknesses and things like that. Metagross not being the great thing it once was. Questionable off-season trades, grabbing Pencer and things like that. And listen, I'm not going to harp on that. You've already heard the GBA podcast and people discussing drafts and things like that. You already kind of know that. You probably already have your own opinions on it. So I'm going to frame it in the sense of power rankings. Steve is low because he lost. He lost a fairly close match, and, in typical Steve fashion, if one thing had gone differently, he probably would have won. But unfortunately, it didn't. Shady had a much better plan and counter-teamed the heck out of him. Cotton Guard was a great move on that end. That being said, Steve has a good team, and he has a lot of really interesting pieces that just don't click together yet, but could very easily, especially with free agency coming up at week 4. Honestly, Steve's got a building team. He's got a rebuilding team. He's had that for a long time. And while, a lot of people said the year he lost Malamar was going to be the year everything clicks together, it still may be a process throughout this year of, getting some more trades and things like that. He's got a lot of really good assets. I'm just not sure how well the team gels together. He's going to have to convince me of that. But that being said, he's definitely got pieces there. It's just figuring out what kind of picture the pieces actually make when they're put together, and making sure that you didn't just mix up like 4 boxes of puzzle pieces together and get screwed with an incomplete piece. Number 12 is Cooper Kishiro, the Utah Jasmine. A incredibly close loss to Kote. And for a lot of people, that would probably be enough to shoot you up pretty high, honestly. Maybe even above some of the winners. But Cooper has a good matchup against Kote. He's one of the few people with, multiple good, solid water resist and defensive options to stall out rain turns and take hits. If there's anybody that's going to be able to do that, it's Cooper. If there's anybody that got, some renewed power and offensive options this season, it's Cooper. That being said, it's going to be interesting to see because, like I said, I do think he has a fairly good matchup against Kote, and I'm not sure how great his matchup is going to be against other things. The thing about Cooper is everybody's going to have to punch holes through his walls, and that's a really hard thing for people to do. That being said, as of week 1, he still hasn't necessarily shown the ability to punch back, which was the thing that held him back a lot of last season. We talked about it in his interview. He still believes the offense is a plug-and-play kind of option. And, I don't think the stats are necessarily there to back it up. Usually the guys with the hardest hitting things are the guys who excel. And, Cooper may not believe in that philosophy. He may be right. He could be wrong. At this point, it's looking like he's wrong. But we'll see. He can definitely shake things up and still come back. But as of right now, he's definitely in the back half of the league. I think he has a solid draft, but I think he's definitely going to need to consider, moving some more things around and getting different forms of offensive pressure. That being said, it's still super, super early in the season, so there's absolutely no telling. I could be wrong, and he could go on to go 11-1 for the rest of the season. Number 11 is going to be the Los Angeles Nido Kings. Danza coming in with a pretty good win off of Nexus. Would be higher, but again, it's a win off of Nexus, who, league historically is not the most threatening, Danza didn't walk into the prison yard and knock out the biggest guy on the block there. He knocked out Nexus, and he got a good win. He played the game right. He made, a lot of good predictions, and Nexus played right into it, and it gave Danza the win. A lot of times that's enough, and in this case, it was enough. However, the reason why Danza isn't higher and isn't even above some of the other teams that lost is I'm still not completely sold on his draft. I'm not completely sold on his approach. I definitely am glad to see him go a little bit more straightforward and less esoteric than he did last season. We didn't see Ironhead Raikou or anything ridiculously like that. He said he was going to return to fundamentals, and it looks like he might have. Granted, I'm going to go in with a little bit of skepticism and see how that works out because, again, I think some other people that lost to bigger threats than Danza's win against his threat. That being said, it's still a good win, still a good move for Danza, and, this could be the same way he went about Season 1. He could, fly under the radar, get in there on a wild card spot, and could end up being the Season 3 champion. Right now, not betting my money on it. He's going to have to do some major convincing to switch me to that, but it's good enough to convince me that he deserves the number 11 spot. Coming in at number 10 is Adam T&A TV of the Anaheim Mighty Ducklets. The Anaheim Mighty Ducklets coming off a pretty solid win there, beating up poor innocent baby Roger in his crib while he was asleep with the threatening might of Ursaring. I'm just kidding. Ursaring didn't do anything. It's an Ursaring. Number 10 is a good spot for Adam. Expansion teams are mostly going to be in the middle to the bottom right now because they have the most to prove. Especially Adam, who had a very back and forth D-League season. A couple of repeated problems and hurdles that he could just not get over in the D-League, which may or may not be present here, but he's going to have to prove it. Again, expansion team at a disadvantage on the draft. The man has an Ursaring and a Vileplume, and while there are some cool things you can do with them, Adam has like an average team base speed of 60 or something like that. When your average base speed is 60 and you're not going to commit to running like Trick Room every single time, you're going to have some problems. You're going to have some issues, and that's the thing Adam's going to have to face, and he's going to have to convince me that he can overcome. Right now, he did a pretty good job of it. It's a pretty good win. He plays well. That's, one of the things about Adam is when he's on, he's definitely on, and he can pull out some great wins. Of course, he's almost as likely to goof it up, but so far he hasn't done that. So far he has made the most of his ragtag Ducklet squad, which is good, kind of the thing I wanted to see when I made up the name, but not necessarily good enough to shoot over some of the more threatening teams that lost, or some of the other teams that won and are also threatening. However, 10's a good spot for Adam. It gives him a lot of room to go up, and I think you will see him go up. If you talk to him, he's going to tell you he's going to lose the whole season, but I don't expect to see that. I expect to see some good creative wins and uses of things, and I think week 1 was a good start for him there. It'll be interesting to see how he does next week as he goes up against one of the arguable powerhouse threatening foes of the league. Number 9 is Real Maril, Miguel, the Mega Mogwai. You may know him from such things as being really good at the D-League, and, he posts videos of him battling Pokemon. He's recently made a shift to not wearing a beanie, which is a move I just can't get behind. For that reason alone, he can't go any higher than number 9. Until we see the return of the beanie in the GBA format, you will not see Real Maril go higher than a number 9. I'm just kidding. There's actually legitimate kind of reasons for him to be number 9. Expansion team at a disadvantage. We definitely saw him get thrown off this week when someone did bring some non-standard things. Granted, he still pulled it out. He pulled it out with his 2 big powerhouse things, and that's going to be my main hiccup here in being convinced that Miguel is going to go all the way to the top. Because the thing is, as I see it, Miguel has about 3 major threats. He has Infernape, he has Excadrill, and he has Honchkrow, and those are 3 scary things. But I think you're going to see them almost every single week. And I think if people can figure out how to break that down around the rest of the things, Miguel's going to have a very hard time adapting with the lack of power he has. Granted, the man loves to run quote-unquote underrated stuff and do well with it, and he's a fantastic battler. That alone is enough to obviously be number 9. But, the team disadvantage, again, is just going to be huge. This week, much like for Adam, is going to be a huge telling battle for Miguel, as, again, he's going to go up against one of the top powerhouses in the league playing Gubs. If he can get through Gubs, even with his new team, that'll say a lot. That'll go really far. That being said, we're going to have to wait and see if he does that. As of right now, leader of the expansion teams as far as I'm concerned, and fairly confident in saying that, but it's kind of hard to see how that's going to stack up against the rest of the teams at this point. Also, he doesn't wear his beanie anymore. Number 8 is the Atlanta Hawluchas, plural. There's more than one Hawlucha. Not in the GBA, actually, and it's not even on this team, but in Fizzy's heart, there's a flock of Hawluchas flying majestically, and sometimes not flying, because it's kind of a luchador thing, and they mix things up a little bit. That being said, number 8, a little bit weird if you have kept track of the list so far. Fizz is at number 8, and he is actually going to be below the guy he beat, which I'll get to in a minute. Fizz definitely made a lot of moves, arguably the most moves of the season. I think mathematically it may be the single most trades in league history at this point on one team, but I'm not quite sure because Gubs and Joe moved a lot of stuff around too. So Fizz has a very different team heading into this, and it's a lot of singularly scary things. I'm not super convinced that the synergy is there, though. He's definitely got a lot of options, but he definitely has a ton of shared weaknesses. He is still looking to move pieces around, and, we could definitely see him plug some gaps in the team structure there. Also, again, the free agency move is still there. But as it stands right now, Fizz has a lot of singular threats that aren't necessarily going to play off of each other. And it's very telling that their match actually went to a timeout this week. Both teams have super hole punchers, but couldn't quite punch holes in the other team. Fizz actually has some great walls on his team now, which, I think the more he plays the season, we're going to see them do more and more. But as of right now, week 1 is definitely telling that he has a very volatile, experimental team, and he may not quite have a grasp over how to use it yet, and the team may not even be done. It's kind of, in a metamorphosis state where I think the team's trying to figure out its identity, and that's going to hold it back for me. That's going to keep it down at number 8, even though I definitely think it's a much scarier, much, more threatening team than it was. There was some kind of charm about Fizz having things like Aerodactyl on his team and making them work. Now he just has a lot of scary things. Granted, you can still see bits of that, preservation of cool with things like Bronzong running heavy metal and heavy slam, but like I said, he's definitely gonna have to sell me on the team having overwhelming synergy, and he's definitely gonna have to prove that he can harness that synergy and pull out some decisive wins, not just time wins. At number 7 is the San Jose Sharpedos, Tom. Tom's actually above Fizz because his team gels better. His team has a lot of synergy. It is a scary team. Tom has always had a scary team in the GBA, no matter what. Even with a couple of fringe things that, are going to make people snark and raise questions, he still just has a lot of really scary good things. His team has Scizor and Kieran Black. That alone right there should be enough to make everyone run like 3 walls. That being said, we did see a failure of Tom to execute with his overwhelming power, and even kind of, a failure to execute defensively, as he did manage to take it to the clock, but unfortunately wasn't able to preserve his things better than Fizz was. That being said, I don't think defense is Tom's best option, and I think he's still trying to figure stuff like that out. I could be wrong. He could be a defensive genius, prodigy in the making. The button just hasn't clicked. But for me, every time I watch him, I think Tom tends to excel in a bit more of an offensive state. And, when he doesn't bring an all-out offensive option and he benches things like Kiram out of concern for its survivability, I think it hurts him. Granted, it's still a scary, spooky team, and that's good enough to be number 7, but, it's not good enough to get him higher than that at this point with a loss and, again, just a team made to blow holes in things, losing to timeout. It hurts. I know it hurts Tom. I know it drives him crazy. I don't expect to see that happen to him again. He's going to go all out for the rest of the season, I imagine, and I think that's going to work out best for him. That being said, a lot of room to move up. Hopefully he doesn't slide back down, but Tom has done very well in the GBA in the last season, and I think you're going to see him up there again this season. I don't have any reason why he wouldn't excel. Number 6 is going to be the New York Yankees Shady Penguin. That is what I say. I didn't rhyme that with anything. That's kind of the joke, is that you're supposed to do a thing and then rhyme it with the thing. But I didn't do it because I'm not shady. I'm not that good. I don't have the catchphrases ready to go. That being said, Shady Penguin is number 6. Killer opening match for him. He's beaten Steve as Kryptonite. He's killed Steve's streak of winning first game, first season, and actually broken his own streak of losing both matches first season. This is the first season Shady Penguin has won his opening game, and it was a great game and a great call by him. A last-minute move on his part, waffling back and forth a little bit, deciding to throw Cotton Guard on there with all of the offensive threats. It was just great. It worked out perfectly. He read the call right. He looked at Steve's team. He said, this is what he's going to do. This is what works against my team. It's finally that next level of, when you're planning for the GBA, you have to look at what you can bring to hurt their team, but also you have to think about what they are going to bring to hurt your team and what you would bring to hurt those specific things, not just the things you would bring to win. It's a very complicated thing to actually try and describe in that sense. That being said, if you followed it, you get what I'm saying. It's a little bit of next level team preparation and counter teaming here, and I think Shady absolutely pulled it off. Mention that, pair that together, I should say, with what I think is one of the better drafts of the entire thing, actually. Gardevoir is a great pickup for him. It's the thing he struggled with, and it takes it off the table for him to play against, as well as giving him some cool options, shenanigans going on there, as well as Tentacruel, which is arguably the best poison type in the game right now. I think so. Probably definitely in this format. And Mega Altaria, which is great. And for a guy who, if you watch this video, has never used Mega Altaria before, he brought a really good set and made it work. Mega Altaria is defensively a beast, not just in standard, but I believe it's going to be one in this format. It forces every single person to bring either an overwhelmingly strong poison move or a steel move, every single time. Because sometimes some of the fairies you could get away with not doing that, but just the sheer fact that he has Mega Altaria on the list means they're going to have to do that. They're going to have to do that, and they're going to have to pack ice and things like that. It eats up a lot of opponent move slots, and if Shady can capitalize that and plan for it and abuse the limited coverage options he's creating by having good defensive options, I think this could be the season the Yankees go back into the playoffs and maybe even make the cup. Which I know is saying a lot for a guy that I'm putting down there at number 6, but that just goes to show you the level that everybody else is at. That being said, again, I think this is one of Shady's best GBA games in the season, in history. I think he gets better every single time. A lot of people give him, a little bit of grief because you may look at him as an LP or other things like that, but the man is getting good at the format, and every time he battles, he gets better. That's not something everyone does. Number 5 is actually going to be where things are going to start getting very wonky and very nitpicky and very judgmental, because much like towards the end of the last season, the top 5 is just very volatile. There are a couple of teams that are standout that are really, really great this season. And the number 5 spot's going to go to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Cote is going to hate me for this. He absolutely thinks he should be a master baller, and he's right there on the cusp of it, honestly. The only reason he's not a master baller is because it wasn't an overwhelming win. He did manage to pull out the win, but honestly, things could have gone very differently for him. That does get a little bit into the theory modding thing, but Cote will be the first person to tell you one more turn of rain, that game would have been totally different, and he would have lost. For a guy that has the premier rain team and so many scary offensive threats, for him to come down to a 1-0 is a little bit scary. At that point, he's just trading things back and forth, and he doesn't have the defensive core to necessarily do that. I still think Cote is probably going to make the playoffs, either in the wild card spot or just straight up by winning his division. But at this point, it may be time to back off of the reputation of being the premier team and go ahead and show people why you were scary. Otherwise, it's kind of the thing where last season he made it a point to play the Nido Kings and not bring rain and prove he could win without rain. It's time to prove why you're a scary team and that it's not just because of the gimmick rain. I think, starting out, running a normal rain team, getting the win is one thing. I think if he had just come out and destroyed people, he would have set a much bigger precedent of fear, and it probably would have helped him out a lot more throughout the season. That being said, I think what we saw from this is that Cote is probably more beatable than a lot of people thought he was going to be. And that's not a good first week impression to leave. That being said, I still expect him to get a ton of wins and do very well. But that kind of explains why he's at number 5. Just because, week 1, you want to set a tone, and I don't think he set the tone he should have set for himself. Number 4 is going to be the Arizona Deoxys. This might be a little bit weird to people that watched all of last season and who are following the games and following the stats, because Gubs had, the tied for biggest win this week, a 4-0 sweep over the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if you watched last season, I have loved Gubs' team for a long time. I've always thought the Deoxys were playoff contenders, and, it's very likely that they're still going to be this season. That said, I am one of the people that was pretty critical of the trades he made with Joe this season. I don't think he made his team better. I too think Gubs is up there with Shady, and the two of them probably had the single best draft. Gubs got 3 things he absolutely wanted and absolutely needed, and they are 3 monster things. My problem is with a lot of the other components of the team that are going to fall to the wayside. In private, I give Gubs a lot of crap for his bench Pokemon because he has a lot of things that are mostly just there to sit on the bench. He swears up and down he's going to have a Salamence playing this season. I'm pretty sure Salamence is just going to sit on the bench. Same thing with a couple of other things. P2 is a trade asset at best. I don't think you're going to see it pull out the utility and usefulness that it did for, someone like Joe last season when it was on a overall lower tier team and could play. What are you going to do with a Walling P2 when you have a Vaporeon and a Skarmory? You don't need that extra bulk anymore. Even though Gubs is a man known for playing offensive bulk, and that's kind of his thing, it's just very weird. I think the team structure looks a little bit weird. And, that's why I'm going to put him at number 4. I already knew Volcarona was a threat. If you let it get away, it's going to do major work. My thing is going to be, how deep does the roster go? If people can get around his big threats, are the, will the backup team be able to handle it? Granted, he may never get in the position where he needs the backup team to get there, and that's enough to put you in the top 4. It's not necessarily enough for me to put you all the way up. All right, the number 3 slot is actually going to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers, the team that Gubs beat, which again is why I said during Cote's section that things are a little bit wonky here. I think Joe has the better team. I think Joe didn't make the aggressive play that he should have made this week, and it kind of cost him. Maybe he was a little bit mentally beat going into the match because, Volcarona did kind of tear through his team, which is a thing that happened. Unfortunately, had he, been a bit more aggressive, gung-ho about it, he may never have ended up in that position where Volcarona would have done that. But that's all theory modding and things like that. Joe's a fantastic player. Joe puts in a ton of work and thought into this format and into his matches every week. Joe has a much better team via trades in the offseason, picking up Haxorus, picking up Heatran, even the loss of Landorus for Tornadus is not nearly as bad as some of the other disparities in trades that other people did. And historically, Joe goes 0-4 in the first game of the season. That's just what Joe does. You know what Joe does after that? He wins a bunch of freaking games, and he wins them pretty decisively. And that's why I went ahead and put Joe at number 3. I'm not surprised for him to come in and lose in the first week, especially not to someone like Gubs. I think sometimes the matchup just isn't there. Maybe that was the case this week. I think you're probably going to see Joe tear through some people's faces in the next couple of weeks. And I don't want to have to do the thing where I start him at the bottom of the power rankings and then constantly move him up like 3 spots every week to justify it, even though he's on a terrible winning streak. I know Joe's good. I know Joe has a good team. Joe's a number 3. That's kind of all there is to it. Number 2 is the New Orleans Pelicans. Again, a team that lost is at number 2 over a lot of other teams that won and some that won huge. But one thing you got to factor in is John lost to Nick, who is the reigning champion right now. That scale matters. It means a lot. John lost a couple of very good things in the offseason to free agency. He picked up some cool stuff that he's more comfortable with and plays better with, and I think in the long run that's going to pay off for him. Unfortunately, there were some hacks in this battle and some game-changing things, and I think that may have had more to do with the loss than just straight up John having been outplayed this week. And when you're going up against Nick, if you're not playing at 100%, you're probably going to lose. So the fact that, in my opinion, John probably wasn't at 100% and still managed to take it down to a 1-0 says a lot. And again, John has a super scary team, and John was the number 2 team last season. If you lose to the number 1 team, you're still the number 2 team. Until somebody else takes John down, he's going to sit at number 2. Granted, if Adam comes in and bops him this week, I might just shove John all the way down to the bottom because that's pretty embarrassing. But that's going to be a big thing for John to, John would have to lose pretty hardcore to do that. So, John's number 2, pretty straightforward. Number 1 goes to the Boston Red Sox, the returning Season 2 champions. Heading into number 3, They win. Nick wins. Nick is so good. Nick has so many scary things. Aegislash, Deoxys speed, Mega Scizor, which is great. And a lot of people sleep on because it's not like the super threatening thing. But in this format, it's very good. Patch is a great hole in Nick's team. Thunderous Therian, which is fantastic. He's got great options now with Scolipede. He's got Diggersby that gets every tutor move in the world it could possibly want. Some cool niche utility in Hawlucha and more sweeping ability, and some decent bulk in Hippowdon. Nick's got options. Nick's got some abilities to move thing, and Nick wins. Nick plays games. He plays games well. He plans super well, and he wins. That's the thing. Until someone beats the Season 2 champion, there isn't any valid reason in the world for him to not be number one in this season. It's very straightforward, and that's pretty much all there is to say about that. So that's going to wrap up this video. There wasn't a lot to talk about because, we're only 1 week in, and judging things off of one video, one match, things like that, a lot of it's previous season history or draft opinions and stuff like that. That being said, hopefully we'll get more going on into these and have some more things to talk about with people back and forth. Let me know what you guys think of doing it top or bottom to top instead of top to bottom. If you think it should go back the other way, if there's anything else you think I should try differently here. Just kind of experimenting around a little bit right now. I think I like it better this way, but it also kind of spoils some things later on. So who knows? We'll see how that goes. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what your rankings are. If you think I'm right or wrong about things, if you think you can do a better job than me, go ahead and write just like a stupidly long, intricate personal power rankings that's like 3,000 words, and I will totally be like, hey man, good job. And then I'll keep doing my thing because you're not getting my job. That being said, leave likes, leave comments, sub, go check out all the channels. Stay tuned to this channel. On Saturday we should have the recap, so if you're watching these matches and you missed a match that went up, or you just don't have the time necessarily to follow all of the matches, you can watch the recap. Gio and Tony are going to go through and they're going to break down all the matches for the week for you. They're going to give you a rundown of the MVP race, and they are going to talk to you about next week matches and their thoughts on those things, and that'll be super fun and should get you hyped up for the matches the next Sunday. So thanks for watching, guys. Peace out.